Necron tier society was extremely rigid and oppressive, with the nobles sitting on top of the hierarchy with absolute authority. The commoners were seen as operating on a different level of consciousness as the nobility, and were generally seen in a similar manner to that of tools and resources. As a result, their lives were forfeits to the dynasty, and were nothing but fuel for a fire. Even when the Necron tier had grown to be a highly advanced society with incredible technology and quality of life, the commoners still resided on the outside ring of a city in mud huts. There was very little room to move up in the hierarchy, and the only promotion one could generally hope to find was in the military. Even then, higher-ranking military officials were still nothing compared to the nobility. The nobility were literally divine, with a will that was said to be reality. If the statement of a noble was not seen in reality, it was the duty of the servants to make it so, regardless of how impossible that may seem. Distance was incredibly important, and commoners were meant to stay far away from the nobility. The society was obsessed with death, and much of life was spent preparing for what came next. Vast tombs were created, and one's legacy was of utmost importance. Chronomancers are Necron cryptechs who specialize in the manipulation of time itself. Truly, there is no feasible explanation for such arcane science that the human mind could comprehend, but these are some of the most valuable and skilled cryptechs amongst the dynasties. While their expertise will vary, they are a conclave who boast the power to literally change history. On the lower end of a Chronomancer's ability, they can create areas in which time flows differently. This can both speed up and slow down time. Outside of battle, this is incredibly useful for labor tasks such as excavation and construction. A group of Chronomancers can see a tomb world entrance mined out of the heart of a mountain in mere hours or less. On the battlefields, they can send forth their power, bringing time to a crawl as enemies slowly wade forwards as if in a viscous fluid, or conjure alacrity to cause their own troops to double in efficiency. They can do so much more though, for they can manipulate the strands of time, rewinding events to play them out again and again until finding the perfect scenario. So powerful are some that they can turn a current event into one of the past, creating years of history in the span of seconds. Nyadrazatha, the Burning One, is one of the ancient star gods known as the Catan. Now shattered and subjugated by the power of the Necrons, his searing wrath lives on throughout the stars. During the War in Heaven, Nyadrazatha played a pivotal role, leading the Necrons into the webway and burning it. This still has an impact to this day, as the Necrons utilized dolmen gates. To the Eldar, this vengeful deity was known by many names. It was the Pyre of the Labyrinth, the Torch of the Ziggurats Lost, the Reaping Winds of Ember Blight. This was a god of destruction, whose kindling was the galaxy. Gleeful atrocity was burned into history at the hands of Nyadrazatha, and his legacy will live on through the eons as one of malefic incineration. While the god has been broken, his shards contain a fraction of this destructive energy, and each one is an avatar of wrath, blazing down to the battlefields like a comet and incinerating all who stand before it. Shards of the Burning One appear to be the most commonly used for harvesting energy, with them being able to pour their power into Necron machinery as well as acting as the main energy source for many powerful artifacts. Destroyer Lords are the epitome of hate. Not even Khorne's minions could possess such spite and pure undiluted disgust as these horrific nihilistic beings. Like all destroyers, they despise life and wish to extinguish every last bit of it down to the microbial level. They yearn for a dead, barren universe and care for absolutely nothing but eradication. They cannot be reasoned with, they will not negotiate, they will not relent in their never-ending quest of death. The majority of destroyers hold a semblance of sentience, but the Destroyer Lord is fully aware and intelligent. They are leaders of the damned and outcast, amassing terrible forces of destroyer legions to wipe the galaxy clean. Do not be mistaken, these beings take no pleasure, no joy in their actions. These things are driven by nothing but pure efficiency. In this manner, they are often hyper-intellectuals in the realm of eradication, using physics, biology, and chemistry to destroy entire planets, from the soldiers that defend it, to the plants that inhabit it, to the germs that cover it. Destroyer Lords are the heralds of oblivion, and nothing in the universe can stay their hand. Do you like reasonably priced, high-quality, cool graphic tees? Then you should check out Into the AM. They are sponsoring this compilation and even sent me some shirts to try on. Here's how they look. You can put them through the washer and dryer without them fading or chipping, which I have tested myself. They are comfortable and made with good material. They are having a big site-wide sale with some things being up to 60% off until April 4th. Thank you again to Into the AM for sponsoring this video. If you like good quality t-shirts and other such clothing, go check them out. Everything they have sent to me has always been high quality and enjoyable to wear. If you like the channel and want to support me, definitely go check them out. Even just clicking the link helps me make these videos. This is what a Flayed One transformation looks like in real time. Cryptek Valnir awakened her Lich Guard from the Great Sleep, the mighty warriors emerging from caskets. They crashed their fists against chest plates and salute, all but for one. Pablaur was his name, and while the Lich Guard armed themselves, Pablaur kept his eyes dim and faced the wall. Valnir and the head Lich Guard Shadukar exchanged words, while the others remained silent and ready. Suddenly, Pablaur's mouth cracked open, drawing Cryptek's attention. Then he began to scream. The Lich Guard collapsed, clattering onto the floor, and placed his hands beneath his shoulders and began rocking back and forth. Crackles sounded from his metal bones, spikes erupted all along his body, along with hooks and wicked edges. He juddered along the floor, sending cracks crazing through the obsidian with mindless blows. Erratic insanity was plain to see with every motion, and its hands were now long talons. A Canoptek spider flew at the Flayed One, and upon impact it reeled, blurting horrible static as spikes erupted from its back. Energy shot from Valnir's Staff of Lights, destroying the spider and Pablaur quickly. How do Necrons convey emotion? The Necrons may seem like an emotionless race who know nothing but death, and this is only exaggerated by the fact that they do not have mouths or facial muscles to create expression, yet it is far from the truth. Necron expression comes from a blend of technological display and ancient tradition. On the side of technology, many nobles will emit patterns of light through means of discharge nodes, which indicate an emotion, and sometimes they may even use these to speak. Along with these nodes, they may also use interstitial glyph signifiers and ocular flares. Auditory ciphers are used for sounds such as clearing one's throat, and vocal actuators are used to speak. Some nobles will use complex hand gestures and stances to display a feeling or expression. On the traditional side of things, something as simple as distance can go a long way. In Necron tier society, the distance one stood from another was of utmost importance and indicated respect and hierarchy. For a noble to stand close to someone indicated great appreciation and affection towards that individual. The truth is, the Necrons are a people who still cling to emotion, and while they have lost much from biotransference, those still sentient still feel something. These Necrons encountered the Tyranids for the first time. Cryptek Valnir was on her way to awaken the Dynast of Calrentir when she noticed a shimmer of light peeking through the fissures miles above. Suddenly, something shrieked and an odd creature landed on the ground before them. It was large, with great spiked limbs jetting out of its back. Intelligent black eyes stared at them from a face full of tendrils, and parts of its body blended with the stone walls. The lictor shot hooks from its chest that clattered off the Lich Guard shields and leaped over the Necrons and bisected one. The creature landed gracefully and lunged at Valnir with incredible speed. Panic overwhelmed the Chronomancer, but as the beast neared her, her greatest Lich Guard shot out a hand and grabbed its back. It stalled and mewed in pain as Shadukar ripped out the beast's spine. The battle was not won yet, for suddenly thousands of organics emerged, gene stealers and lictors alike filling the tunnel, met by a swarm of Canopteks. Even worse, Flayed Ones appeared, and while many descended into slaughtering the Tyranids, others still chased Valnir and her guard. They made haste towards their only means of survival. This Necron changed history. Cryptek Valnir and her Lich Guard were desperately fleeing a swarm of both Tyranids and Flayed Ones, sprinting down the halls of their ancient tomb world. Organic shrieks mixed with bleating static wails as the tide of flesh and metal poured behind them. Halt, Valnir commanded, and with a grunt of effort froze their assailants in time. An idea rose, and she guided her guard through a district she had once served in during the time of flesh. The enemy were on their heels again, and one of her Lich Guard fell beneath the mass. They emerged into a vast chamber in which the early Chronomancers had practiced their art. Valnir began to chant, activating long dormant protocols of the laboratory. Rocks rumbled and lights flickered. Ancient scenes of glory from Necron tier history lined the walls. Echoes rose around them, and she let the enemy in. She shouted the activation command. Lights flashed and faded. Then the Flayers and Tyranids were gone. 3 of her Lich Guard were gone too, yet she could no longer remember their names. A new panel on the walls showed an art piece of Necron tier forms battling an artistic representation of the Flayers and the Tyranids. This is what a duel between Warhammer's most powerful species looks like. Upon Karnak, a Necron overlord battled Eldar Autarch Elric Swiftblade in single combat. Elric leapt at his foe, his hissing power blade meeting with the Necron's staff. The two weapons crackled together before the overlord pulled away and smashed the Autarch's flight pack with blinding speed. The sundered wings dropped to the ground and Elric lunged low, his blade striking an armored leg. Almost instantly it was repaired. The overlord mocked his opponent and swung his staff down once again. Elric threw himself to the side, barely avoiding the backswing, rolled to his feet and put a flurry of blows into his opponent's chest and shoulder. Its arm went limp, and the Eldar moved quickly, swinging his blade high, but the overlord moved just as fast and sent Elric sprawling. The Eldar rose, peppering the Yingracht with his pistol and pressing the attack with the dance of his blade. The Autarch drove his sword through the Necron's leg, spun around and removed its head. The overlord repaired and rose, but Elric stabbed it straight through the chest. Stay down this time. He grinned and ran his sword through its head. This Necron beat the Eldar at their own game. flame. Upon Karnak, Illic Nightspear knelt, crouched within the snow, completely hidden from sight. He, his rangers, a Farseer, and many Exodites had waited here for days, silent and unmoving. Katrathane, Farseer, adept of Eldorath Starbane, had read these skeins and had determined that this would be the Necron's downfall. "The Soldar come," she whispered, a smile upon her lips. A flash of green light shone brightly, and the Necrons emerged. Among them stood Anrakyr the Traveler, and Cryptek Orkhan the Diviner. Illic aimed down the sight of Voidbringer, Anrakyr's silver cranium in the line of fire.
"Justice,"
Uldunorath whispered to Illic.
"Justice for all those killed by the Soldar. Justice for me, for the Eldar."
One shot would be all Illic needed to doom the Soldark warlord to the warp. Suddenly, the Cryptek's head jerked up and stared directly at Illic. The Pathfinder fired. Reality screeched as the warp was made manifest for a split second. The Necrons disappeared. His shot hit nothing but the earth. The hunters became the hunted. The very skeins of fate were changed.
"Life is wasted on the living. Sterilize this world."
Szeratech heavy constructs are the titanic guardians of the Necrons. They are one of the most powerful war machines that a Necron overlord may possess, and they are capable of shifting the tide of any battle. For millions of years, it was these constructs' duty to protect the master program of a tomb world. But now, as the Necrons awaken, they are summoned forth to spell doom amongst the bacteria that so plagues this new galaxy. These are the symbol of dynastic might, and are only called forth for the most apocalyptic conflicts. Sacred and mythical, these constructs are priceless, often seen as being worth far more than an entire noble house. The singularity cannons they bear can tear out the hearts of mountains or titans. Implacable, it rumbles forward atop spider-like limbs, shaking the earth with every step and impaling any in its way. The awakening of a Szeratech cohort is nothing short of eschatological. These are weapons that only emerge to kill a civilization. The armament of a Szeratech is truly world-ending. This Necron Empire is ruled by a machine spirit. A severed world occurs when all nobility of a Necron planet do not wake up from the Great Sleep. The Tomb World's machine spirit overseer takes control and automatically defaults to eradicating anything on the planet, and oftentimes in the system. This is not limited to other Necrons, for the program does not know the difference, along with the fact that dynastic infighting was so ingrained into the Necron people. Such was the case on Sarkon when radiation storms destroyed the memory banks of all who slept. The master program seized control over the many legions and took on a new name and personality for itself. The self-proclaimed Sarkoni Emperor reached out its mighty arms and began the takeover. It first obliterated the defenses of Takarak and wiped clean the minds that slept within it, taking them under its control. It then reached even further, taking 3 more tomb worlds, then extending its influence to non-Necron planets. Using mind shackle scarabs, it ensured the populace was easy to control, and this program has since been carving out a severed empire within the realm of the Necrons. Tomb Sentinels are perhaps the Necron's greatest Canoptek defender. Along with its counterparts, the Tomb Stalker, these insectoid scuttling masses of living metal are horrifically powerful. Throughout a tomb world, they burrow, wriggling and prowling in and out of reality, boring through solid stone as if it were liquid with the help of their phase field generators. Their sensor clusters give them extreme perception, and they are able to detect sound through hundreds of meters of rock and need no light to detect its prey. No matter the depths, the Tomb Sentinel will find interlopers and brutally destroy them. They boast extreme speed and mobility alike, using their phase generators to pass through anything in their way. Even without the ability to phase in and out of reality, they are immensely durable. The shifting hide of living metal that acts as their carapace, impervious to heavy weapons fire, and able to reunite severed areas of its body. The exile cannon that appears as its single glowing eye is its true weapon though. This terrible marvel of Necron science banishes whatever it hits into a pocket dimension. This can affect even large vehicles and monsters, dooming any within to a slow, lonely demise. This is what it's like to wake up on a Necron tomb world after 60 million years. High Cryptek Valnir awoke to utter darkness. It tried to take a breath, but had no lungs, only a soundbite emerging. Panic enveloped its mind, and its fists banged against the sarcophagus that kept it bound. It was omnipresent, its consciousness undifferentiated between sarcophagus, cable, and skeletal body. It saw through the tomb world. In a blink, it saw 60 million barely remembered cycles. Then the view was gone, battered into its subconscious. Events became localized and fog worlds around it. The Necron's mouth opened in a silent scream as it tried to break free of its bonds. Slowly, its identity flowed in. Its name was Valnir. It was a she. There was no need for breath, for she left lungs behind long ago. Memories surged into her mind and the panic subsided. Trepidation and concern quickly replaced it. The fear of death, the grip of mortality. Was this how it began? Suddenly, the casket shot up through the tombs and stopped, opening to release its captive. Valnir strode out and began the work of awakening a world. Canoptek Scarabs are the incredibly helpful laborers and devourers of the Necrons. They are near perfect constructs, able to take literally any material and convert it into energy for later use in creation. Because of this, they build and repair almost everything the Undying race uses. This happens to also make them extremely deadly. In moments, they can scour a rhino free of its plating, consume entire battlements and fortifications, or devour scores upon scores of meat bags of all Xenos types, all while being able to turn around and erect a Necron construct that would take mortal laborers years to build. They come as chittering massive hordes that find great use in battle, washing over anything and everything, consuming flesh and adamantium alike while emitting a deafening buzz that strikes terror and sows confusion. They will pick apart every single last bit of you, as you are then swiftly turned into raw energy, giving your worthless flesh meaning as a resource for the great dynasties. Truly, what more could a flesh bag like yourself ask for but to contribute to the true rulers of the galaxy? There is one Necron in Warhammer who still has bouts of true happiness. Nemesor Zahndrekh has emotional capacity unlike any other within his race. His particular madness and eccentricity somehow bring out the best in him. At the end of his victorious campaigns, which are all of them, he has an event that he calls an epilogue. In this time, his lords must sit around his magnificent table, while Zahndrekh recites poetry for hours and hours, all while he eats delicious food off an empty plate and gets drunk off wine from a barren cup. Usually accompanying the Necron is the enemy general, for it is honorable to hold a Necron tier general after a good war. These are usually Imperial commanders who, surrounded by metallic ghouls speaking an incomprehensible language, generally die from fear. In another time, Zahndrekh can be seen playing with the Canoptek pets of his old friend, laughing and roughhousing on the ground with the beasts, something no other Necron noble could even conceive doing. Wild beings like Trazyn certainly have more emotion than the average Necron. It is more driven from obsession and is far less genuine. Vargard Obyron is the greatest bladesman of the Necrons, and here's an example. Creeping along his command barge, a Calidus assassin thought she was completely unseen as Zahndrekh pondered the battlefield, asking his Vargard what he should do. Right as the assassin got close, Obyron responded with,
"Let them commit, my lord. Let them feel victory is within reach, then take everything from them."
Making his position known, the assassin's head snapped around, baffled that she had been seen, and Obyron lunged. A duel ensued, resulting in Oberon's complete victory. This was not the first but the 7th Calidus he had slain. His perception is incredible, able to see in thousands of arcane spectra, and able to notice the tiniest micro-fragments of change. Along with this, he has a reaction time of a few thousandths of a second, and carries a speed not seen by any other Necrons. Using chronosense and divination algorithms, he can become unstoppable for a time upon the battlefield. Obyron is truly one of the galaxy's greatest, and as long as he persists, not a scratch will be seen upon Zahndrekh, not on his physical form or his honor. There was a terrible moment when Nemesor Zahndrekh was wrenched into reality. When Zahndrekh and his lumbering Vargard were charged with conquering the severed world's Doat, the Nemesor was shaken to his core. As he gazed upon the soulless Necrons that emerged from their long-dead tombs, he saw them for what they truly were, a terrible, emotionless version of himself. "Obyron," he spoke, "they're us." He went silent for a long while, and Obyron scried into the command ship to see his lord clasping onto a railing in support, weeping. For a time, Zahndrekh's cheer was entirely gone, and as Obyron visited him in his garden, Zahndrekh uttered the horrible words, "Who are you?" This almost led to the Vargard slaying his Nemesor, as he was persuaded by their ally Szeratech. But as Zahndrekh dreamed through the eyes of his troops, he realized that some dubious wizard had cast an evil spell to turn these Necron tier into soulless robots. His mind became clear and their ventures continued. In classic Zahndrekh fashion, the Nemesor attempted to disguise himself, and the result baffled Obyron. Vargard Obyron sat within a chamber, pondering and dreading what his duty was calling him to do. These were hard times, as his master had seemingly gone fully insane, and a weighty decision had fallen upon the bodyguard's shoulders. He rose from the rock he was sitting upon, when suddenly something spoke. "Are you alright, old chap?" At first, Obyron thought he was hearing voices, but he turned to see Zahndrekh, draped in a cowl of rough cloth. The Vargard had many questions, as he had not seen his lord in weeks, but they all piled onto one another on the way to his vocal actuators, and what came out surprised even him.
"My lord,"
he spoke.
"what Arngidrum are you wearing?"
"A disguise, dear friend," proclaimed Zahndrekh with a flourish. "I've concealed myself as one of the peasantry in order to make my way down here without being bothered." Despite the apparent madness, this interaction would actually lead to the resurgence of Zahndrekh and restore Oberon's faith in his old master. Imotekh and Hellbrecht dueled upon the ice bridge of Schrödinger 7 at the apex of their conflicts. Hellbrecht brought his sword down again and again, until finally a blow connected, severing cables. Yet these repaired quickly.
"You grow weak,"
the Stormlord said.
"weak and tired. You and your king will fail here, as humanity's empire will fail, because I will it.
The High Marshal pushed onwards, lunging at the Xenos as Imotekh raised up his staff to blast Hellbrecht with arcs of lightning. As he went deaf, numb, and blind all at once, he poured all his Emperor-given strength into one final blow. Arcing his sword down, he struck the Stormlord, shattering the blade and causing Imotekh to cry out, yet the Space Marine was spent. The Necron loomed over the kneeling warrior as Hellbrecht's primary heart went into arrest. Chuckling, the Necron took Hellbrecht's arm and severed his hand.
Learn from this,
the Stormlord said,
so that we may duel again.
Imotekh then kicked the Space Marine off the bridge, sending him plummeting and earning Hellbrecht the greatest dishonor he had ever faced. Imotekh destroyed these Eldar. Here's what happened. Eldorath Starbane, a Farseer of Imotekh, had led his warriors to the tomb world Solmenar. This world was only barely awake, the majority of Necrons still slumbering within. To Starbane, this was just another routine purging, often done by his craftwork. Sure of his own victory with runes cast too hastily, the Eldar rushed to the tomb, and he was immediately met with the genius of Imotekh, who had recently made planetfall to bring the local overlord into the Szeratech dynasty. Yet there were many Eldar and few Necrons in comparison, so Imotekh eventually retreated, knowing the foe, so sure of his superiority, would follow them deep into the tomb. Within these depths, the Stormlord trapped the warhost in the core. He first released Scarabs, then Flayed ones, and as the remaining Eldar formed into defensive knots, finally warded off the ghouls, the force fields were lowered and the Immortals marched forth. The Asuryani were cut down en masse. Only one survived, that of Starbane, who would then lose his hand to the Stormlord and be sent back to his craft world. After defeating an arrogant Eldar Farseer, Imotekh severed his hand, then said this:
Let me tell you of my future. My hand will reach out into the stars, reshaping the galaxy into a place of order and unity. Under my reign, the kingdoms of old shall live again, reborn to an age of power and glory, the like of which you can only imagine. I will rule every planet touched by the light of this star, and even in the darkness beyond, my name will be whispered with fear and respect. Your future, by contrast, is looking less than glorious. You will not be reaching out your hand to anything ever again, I think. Embrace the pain and humiliation of his loss, so that you might better learn the lessons from your defeat. Learn them well enough, and you might even be reborn as an enemy worthy of my attention. A hand is a measly price for such a gift, is it not?
This is how Necrons view humans as told through the perspective of Anrakyr the Traveler. After destroying the human armies upon Calrentir, Anrakyr strode through the ruins. Humans were being flushed out of their hiding places and exterminated. Primitive structures clustered around him, little more than enclosures against the elements. This place was infested with grey buildings and grey people. Earlier in the battle, Anrakyr had mused,
what dull creatures living in their own filth.
That organic being should so taint Calrentir brought great surging anger to the Overlord, the jewel of one of the ancient dynasties, populated by savages, reclaimed by the life that had once been extinguished and purged beneath the marching benevolence of the Necrons. Anrakyr kicked one of the feebly struggling bodies at his feet, barely noticing it cry out in unreasoning animal pain. For but a tiny moment he thought he saw the gleam of intelligence, some shred of evidence of sentience in its eyes. Life always struggled against order, but just once, Anrakyr wished that he would see organisms submit and accept the gift and honor he brought. Anrakyr the Traveler fought upon Calrentir against the Imperial Guard and Space Marines. He slaughtered the organics that infested the tomb world, ripping apart tanks and skewering animals left and right. Grotesquely armored meat creatures, that of Space Marines, barreled into the lines and were repelled by the Parian Eternals, yet still Assault Marines descended from the heavens and added to the melee. This battle was in need of its conclusion, as if summoned a leader of the Astartes emerged and bellowed a challenge to the Traveler in its organic gibbering. The Marine opened with a salvo of bolts, which were deflected by Anrakyr's war scythe. The animal then charged and the two clashed, battling for hours. Despite its efforts, its biological existence was no match for the Necron's untiring body.
Surrender,
demanded Anrakyr.
Submit to order.
The animal only snorted. Tiring of this fight, the Overlord shoved his war scythe through its abdomen. He lifted it into the air and met its dying eyes.
Filth,
he muttered and threw the animal away. The Blood Angels and Necrons teamed up to fight the Tyranids. Here's what happened. The Blood Angels, Flesh Terrors, Imperial Guard, and Sisters of Battle fought the Tyranids in a gruesome war for the Cryptis system. Countless lives had already been lost, and now the Lord Commander and his troops fought a desperate defense within Port Hilos. Dante knew it was an unwinnable war, yet they would find hope in an unsuspected ally. Dante stood within the command bunker discussing plans until a tech marine entered and informed him of something arriving from the edge of the system at incredible speed. Soon enough, monoliths descended from the sky. One arrived directly in front of the Imperial defenders, and from its eternity gate strolled forth Anrakyr the Traveler. Immediately, 100 Astartes leveled their weapons. In accented High Gothic, the Overlord requested an audience, and Dante allowed the Necrons into the port. The Imperial general was wary of the Xenos, but Dante knew there was no other hope of winning against the Tyranids. After negotiations had been struck, the two forces became allies and would stand together against the alien menace. Lord Commander Dante and Anrakyr the Traveler teamed up to fight the Tyranids. This was their plan. They fought within the Cryptis system, which was home to an ancient alien device known to the Imperials as the Magnovitrium. They had used this for harvesting solar energy, but in truth it was meant for so much more. This odd device was actually an artifact from the days of the War in Heaven. To the Necrons it was known as the Starflame, and Anrakyr knew exactly what they needed to use it for. Even combined, the two forces had no hope of destroying the millions of bioships that hung amongst the stars, so they would use the Starflame to ignite the core of a gas giant known as Eros, creating an explosion that would erase the Hive fleet. To do this, they would need to take control of the Starflame on Tartaros, the Cogitator Spires on Asphodex, and the Solarium on Lysios. A Cryptek and Death Company were sent to Tartaros, while Anrakyr and Dante would fight together on Asphodex. Lysios would see the visitation of the Flesh Tears, and lastly, Blood Angels and Zarathustra's legions would secure the Vapor Conveyor on Eros. Upon Asphodex, the Blood Angels and Necrons fought desperately against a swarm of Tyranids. The battle was in their favor until a massive form loomed into view. A Hierophant joined the fight and began to eradicate the Space Marines with his massive cannons. All weapons fire seemingly did nothing to the beast, and even Anrakyr's monoliths could not wound it. Yet the Necron Overlord had one last ploy that could secure them victory. From the heavens a blazing comet struck into the earth. A Catan shard of Nyadrzatha, the Burning One, rose as its impact incinerated hundreds of Tyranids around it. The Bio-Titan turned and fired at the godlike shard, yet its salvos did nothing to the reality-bending monster. Flesh and fire met as the two godlike beings battled. The unbelievable strength of the Hierophant pitted against the arcane physics-defying power of the Catan. Around the giants, the battle raged, the allies continuing their desperate stand until a mournful hiss sounded and the Titan lurched forwards. As it tried to stand, the shard plunged a fist into it and cooked its innards until the beast exploded in a massive shower of burning gore. This Necron Overlord dueled a Hive Tyrant. Anrakyr the Traveler and Commander Dante fought against the Tyranids upon Asphodex. Anrakyr had reached his objective, the spires that contained the Magnovitrium's controls. As the Space Marines battled outside, the Traveler surged towards the apex of the tower. As he neared the chamber, one last foe emerged, a winged Hive Tyrant, slightly wounded but far from defeated. His forces moved in to destroy the threat, but Anrakyr held out his hand. This was a fight he would win alone. Anrakyr traded blows with the beast and slowly lowered it into the edges of the spire chamber. The low ceiling slowed the tyrant, its wings catching on the jagged walls. They fought for minutes, War Scythe and Bone Sword trading blows with incredible power. Finally, the Tyranid overextended and Anrakyr seized the opportunity. He stepped into the tyrant's guard and sliced open its thorax, ending the beast's life. The Overlord took a moment of satisfaction before extending his will to the controls around him and advancing the allies' plan. This is what it's like to fire one of the greatest weapons in Warhammer. Anrakyr the Traveler battled the Tyranids and his forces were losing. They began to retreat, but the Traveler had one last ploy. Lights pulsed all up and down his chassis. His body deactivated and lightning danced as power was siphoned to a small weapon embedded in his wrist. Sentient Necrons wailed in sudden terror of what was to come. Then a tiny object, a sliver of Anrakyr's own necrodermis, launched. Thunder struck as the sliver of necrodermis shot into the enemy as a meteorite. Reality itself was violated. The laws of physics screamed in agony as Necron science bent and broke it like a domesticated animal. A tiny fragment of Anrakyr's own body ravaged the Tyranids and the earth alike, blazing through them at the speed of light. Monsters exploded and showered the world with viscera, and all in the arrow's path were erased in the blink of an eye. The very earth erupted, rent apart by the unbelievable force of impact, accompanied by an ear-shattering boom as it cried out. Radiation oozed through the air, seeping out from the glowing fused glass wreckage, and Tyranids withered away and died. If you're a human who colonized a tomb world, here's an example of what might happen to you. Anrakyr the Traveler fought against the human settlements that had so foolishly made their homes on the surface of Calrentir, an ancient tomb world of the Necrons. He had already disposed of the main forces and was now destroying the stragglers stragglers. Human soldiers burst from one of the buildings, firing lasguns as they went. Anrakyr recoiled in disgust, annoyed and wary that some of their tainted cells might besmirch his chassis. The destroyer beside him giggled and laughed, and began to club the meat bags with his Gauss cannon. Then, finally, the 3 Treyarch Praetorians made their presence known. The universe groaned as scything waves of light emerged from the Praetorians' covenant rods. Weeping humans, eyes and mouths wide, desperation spewing from their wretched faces, erupted into clouds of ash. These last stragglers were being rounded up by Necron warriors and executed. The bodies were lined up for incineration or brought to feed the Canoptek spiders, so that their matter may be used for much more useful endeavors. All signs of human settlement were being dismantled and destroyed, and every last living thing on the planet was being eradicated. Anrakyr the Traveler absolutely trolled these Tau. Here's what happened. A Tau colony was under attack by a small Tyranid force of High Fleet Gorgon. In their final hour, an unexpected savior came to their aid. Anrakyr himself, along with his Parian veterans, brought their fleet's firepower to bear and obliterated the Tyranids. As the Traveler descended to the planet, the Tau arranged for a grand celebration, setting up a luxurious welcome party full of gratitude. Unfortunately for the scions of the greater good, their colony meant little to the Necrons, and when Anrakyr stepped out of his ship, all he saw were inferior, disgusting vermin. The Tau's smiles and cheers quickly turned into expressions of anguish and screams of fear. As Anrakyr began his cleansing, the world was quickly rid of the wretched fleshlings, as Anrakyr completed the harvest, bringing his people another step forwards to the dynasty's rightful rule of the galaxy. This may have been the first contact between the Tau and the Necrons. Armen Horl is a destroyer that is almost cute. He accompanies Anrakyr the Traveler on his journeys, providing heavy firepower for the Overlord. Unlike most destroyers though, the usual nihilism and hate is not easily found within this Necron. Instead, Armen Horl giggles and coos as he battles. In an almost comical and childish moment between combat, the destroyer starts to whiz around Anrakyr in circles, cooing to himself as he flies around faster and faster until Anrakyr finally stops him. When shot at with lasguns, the destroyer laughs as if he were being tickled. He proceeded to begin clubbing the humans to death, laughing with pure glee. The curse of the destroyer does many things to a Necron's mind, and perhaps the existence of Armen Horl is a merciful one compared to the spite-filled, obsessive destroyers that most can find in the galaxy. Some Necrons see the Tyranids as the ultimate foe in the galaxy. Here's why. In Anrakyr the Traveler's opinion, the Tyranids were a threat to the Necrons. They were life unfettered, anarchic, predictable only in their insatiable hunger. Their consumption of the lesser races proved problematic in the establishment of Necron dynastic rule and the eventual goal of the imposition of lifeless order against a galaxy teeming with chaos. He had fought the creatures on several occasions, each nearly disastrous. Their sheer numbers proved a vexing irritation that overwhelmed his mindless hordes. Anrakyr is not the only one of his people who shares this sentiment about the Xenos, and even the Silent King himself has decreed their threat. Multiple times have the Necrons allied themselves with the lesser species in order to quash a Tyranid fleet, and Anrakyr himself would soon find a need for Imperial allies to face the Great Devourer. This Necron showed honor to a human, and even backed out of a deal with another Necron in the name of this honor. Anrakyr the Traveler and Illuminor Xeras had joined forces and struck a deal. Xeras had enhanced Anrakyr's famed Parian Eternals, and accompanied the Traveler as he eradicated the human vermin upon a recently found tomb world. The battle outside the Cadian-held fortress was easily won, but Xeras' prize, the human commander, resided within the Bastion. Anrakyr went forth to extend the option of honorable surrender as the codes of battle demanded, but Xeras ordered death marks into the fortification, and they slaughtered everyone save for the Cadian colonel. As the Imperial man was brought out, Anrakyr spoke.
You have fought well. No shame should be inferred from this defeat.
He then decapitated him. Xeras grew enraged. How dare you? He was to be mine. That was our core. This is outrageous.
You forget your station, Cryptek. Your payment was forfeit the moment you manipulated the battle's prosecution. An error compounded through improper method.
Canoptek wraiths are one of the Necron's greatest weapons. Their original duty was to simply guard and patrol the tomb worlds as the dynasties slumbered, checking for repairs and performing maintenance prescribed by their tomb spider overseers. Within them lies the powerful phase shifter, which destabilizes reality, allowing the wraith to exist in the interstices. When activated, the Canoptek will disappear, becoming invisible to the eye and anything the vermin so pathetically call sensors. Not only can they phase out their whole bodies though, for they can target specific parts of themselves to phase. The thickest of armor means nothing when your opponent's blade cuts through reality itself, as the wraith's blade phases out only to reappear under your armor and within your chest. This was originally designed to bypass any outer components when making repairs, but now sees extreme use on the battlefield. So too are the excellent scouts and assassins, as they can remain invisible almost indefinitely, performing reconnaissance and floating through a commander's bunker to slay him in his own bed. What is it like to fight the Necrons in Warhammer? If you survive, which you very likely will not, it will be the most horrific, casualty-ridden meat grinder you shall ever witness. It is attrition warfare at its finest, as every foe you destroy will simply phase out to be rebuilt, either within the catacombs of the tomb world you so foolishly set foot upon, or within the great ships that blot out the stars above. The simple fact of it is soul-shattering, as it takes your entire squad to fell a single Necron warrior, your friends being ripped apart by Gauss weaponry, gaining them one of the most painful deaths possible in the universe. If you dare set foot upon the dynastic stones of a tomb world, nightmare engines will emerge from the earth. Millions of dead, emotionless robotic soldiers march forth from the mountains, bringing with them war machines bearing arcane technology the likes you could not even imagine. This is a race that defeated and shackled the very gods themselves, mastering and bending reality to their will. You are nothing but a disgusting, pathetic, worthless insect. The indomitable spirit of humanity will be smothered in darkness and snuffed out. Tomb spiders are the humble and hulking workers of the Necrons. They are key to a tomb world's functioning, ever laboring to maintain its systems and ensure adequate upkeep throughout the millennia. These large fellows are also incredibly valuable in battle, as they silently go from fallen warrior to fallen warrior, swiftly piecing them back together again. So too can they produce Scarabs, which further aid in the task of maintenance and repair. For millions of years, the lowly spider has floated through the silent halls of its tomb world, performing the most important task of any within all the dynasties. For without them, not a single Necron would have woken after the Great Sleep. While these slow and lumbering arachnids may give off an image of the gentle giant, they are not. The moment the disgusting, wretched, flesh-encased vermin that call themselves the galaxy species steps foot upon the sacred stones, they will be flensed by the mighty spider's fabricator array or dissolved by their back-mounted particle beamers. Woe to any insects that seek to desecrate the tombs with their putrid flesh, for they will be utterly, painfully, and swiftly destroyed.
Now, how do you like this?
Canoptek's are the incredibly versatile and advanced automatons of the Necrons. They come in a huge variety, from the tiny scarabs that clean and repair, to the lithe wraiths that shift in and out of reality, to the hulking and ever-working spider. While a tomb world sleeps, it is the Canoptek's that stalk its halls, floating silently as they perform guard duties and general upkeep. Do not let this somber and quiet existence mistake you though, for these beings are extremely deadly on the battlefield. Endless scarab swarms counting in the millions will wash over your lines, eating your flesh and vehicles alike. Slithering wraiths will appear behind you in ambush to slice you to pieces and disintegrate you with particle casters. Even the humble tomb spider may be outfitted with a gloom prism, which completely severs all connection to the warp in its vicinity. Some constructs, such as the Doomstalkers, may be outfitted with weapons of mass destruction, whereas some, such as Acanthrites, hold almost the singular purpose of butchering fleshlings. Particularly powerful and wealthy cryptechs may have entire legions of Canoptek's. Oltymore is a Necron dynasty that rules over humans. Vitok is the dynasty's ruler, and is famous for his deep, insatiable melancholy. As he awoke from the long sleep, he found himself plagued with a sadness as he gazed upon his deathless, emotionless legions. The dynast claimed that there can be no glory in ruling if it were not over mortals. All Necrons cleanse the planets they rise up upon or take control of, scouring it of life. They see the galaxies living as unclean vermin, with a hatred that makes the average space marine look gentle towards other races. The Oltymore Dynasty allows some Xenos to persist under their rule, not granting them any right or comfort of course, for they are not that mad, but using them as slaves for back-breaking labor, as they erect countless structures to the dynast's eternal glory. Mad rulers of the past, such as Unas of the Ithacus dynasty, sent away resources for the trading of these slaves to let loose upon their unholy feasting grounds. Tales such as these can be all too common in the rising threat of the Necrons.
So much fear, so much noise.
Pariahs are one of the galaxy's most horrible and terrifying creations. These unholy creatures were once human blanks who were captured by the Necrons and put through the ancient process of biotransference. Their necrodermis bodies give them greater strength and durability than any human could hope to achieve, and their pariah genes render them invulnerable to psychic powers. The horrific, gut-wrenching, soul-sucking feeling of the human blank permeates around them, bringing lesser men to their knees in fear and iron-willed warriors' hesitation in the surest of strikes. Despite being being housed within necrodermis, the Pariahs are not truly Necron, and so lack the ability to reanimate after extreme damage, as some of their organs still reside inside the shell. Do not let this mistake you though, for any shred of their humanity was burned away in the green flames of biotransference. Whispers speak of the Necrons creating the Pariah gene, and seeding it within humanity so they could use it to combat the Eldar and other psychic beings after the Great Sleep. The Doomed Scythe is yet another mechanical terror that the Necrons hold in abundance. It is an aircraft unlike any other, able to reach supersonic speeds in mere moments, with its pilot not having to worry about frivolities such as G-force or oxygen. It is incredibly maneuverable and terribly efficient. The pilot's able to rely on databanks of billions of scenarios and perform low-flying strafing runs at 3 times the speed of sound. The Doomed Scythe screams as it tears across the skies, emitting a terrible soul-tearing sound that breaks the mind of the poor wretched fleshlings in its wake. This sound digs deep into your psyche, bringing about hallucinations of your greatest fears and immediate panic attacks, followed by all-out insanity. For those with an iron will, however, such as the Great Adeptus Astartes, there are more direct ways of destroying them. On its belly sits a glorious weapon using technology the lesser beings cannot hope to contend with. The death ray pulses with 60-million-year-old arcane power and unleashes a beam of undeniable, unquenchable fury. These worlds create Necron zombies. Severed worlds are a true horror amongst the Necron dynasties and pose a particular and dangerous threat to the undying race. During the Great Sleep, a Tomb World's autonomic spirit would tend to the world. It was these spirits' jobs to awaken the Necrons after 60 million years, yet sometimes things go terribly wrong. Over time, a million different errors could occur, and for some unfortunate worlds, this resulted in the total destruction of all sleepers' minds and higher functions. In this case, a spirit will still awaken the Necrons, yet there will be no nobility to lead. The spirit goes towards defense protocols, seizing control over the inhabitants and destroying anyone nearby, including Necrons. These spirits have very little function outside their basic duties, resulting in these legions becoming horrifying, shambling hordes. The Necrons have ever been soulless, but this brings it to a whole different level. There is no intelligence, no emotion behind a single Necron, and they are led by a system that knows little to nothing of the outside world. Understand that these may be millions if not billions of Necrons. The Necrons have AI nobility. During the time of Flesh, many important nobles perished before biotransference. Their corpses would be sealed within the lesser chambers of a tomb world, and their personalities would be approximated with artificial intelligence. Advanced programs mimicked them as they were said to have been. Bodies had been constructed made of the same living metal that the true Necrons used for motive functions, but no real intelligence motivated them. Only artificiality acted behind their eyes. These are the fallen leaders of Necron society, those who gasped out their last as cancers destroyed their bodies, politicians assassinated in their prime, and generals called in the ages-long wars against the old ones. They were the ones deemed worthy of remembrance and reconstitution, heroes, luminaries, but they were just complex machines, no better nor worse than the tomb constructs that the Necrons created to serve their purposes. In such ways was the wisdom of ages preserved and brought to immortality. This Blood Angel Sergeant was saved by Anrakyr the Traveler and witnessed the awakening of a tomb world. Sergeant J-Teal was making his last stand after crash landing onto a Tyranid-infested world when Necrons emerged from the gloom and destroyed the swarm. One of them strode forwards and said,
"I wish to offer assistance in your time of trials."
"Why?" said J-Teal. "Why would you help us, Xenos?"
"You assume that we think and behave on the same twisted wavelength that you filthy humans do. You assume our reasoning follows the same paths that your stunted minds take. We wish to help because it is in our interest to aid you here. Be relieved that we offer our assistance. Now, come with me as I awaken this tomb world. Know that you are privileged to witness this. Take it as a mark of respect for your skill in fighting these things."
"And then?" asked J-Teal. "After you have awoken this world?"
"Then you will take me to your leader."
Zantraora is a Necron tomb world of biology experiments. The nobles of this odd conclave are obsessed with the idea of apotheosis. The scientists of Zantraora seek new bodies for the Necron people. As a result, they have been obsessively and meticulously scouring the galaxy, one planet at a time, in search of the perfect life form. Whether this will lead to the cloning of bodies for the Necrons or the inhabitation of a host species is unknown, but they work tirelessly to find the truth. Of these odd scientists, Illuminor Zahndrekh is their most skilled and twisted. Being overseer of the conclave, enclave and conducting much of his research upon this planet. The vast depths of Zantraora are filled with both the living and the dead. The screams of countless aliens wail under the earth, the Necrons using their arcane technology to keep them alive while conducting horrific experiments. Progress is slow to the extreme, for they must check every possible hypothesis and research every single being down to the molecular level. The blood vats of Zantraora are a place of horror, yet to the Necrons researching upon it, it is a place of salvation.